Welcome to the Truth Wins podcast. This is episode 73, titled Faith Doesn't Have to Be Blind, Part 2. I almost said Dieu, Part Dieu. What was that show?
Yeah, with Charlie Sheen.
Yeah.
And, Vietnam.
Yeah, it was like corny. But anyways, we don't want to start that.
Hot Shots,
we already have Hot Shots,
Deux.
Part Dieu. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to do better than Hot Shots, Part Dieu. But this is Todd Sherman, your host. As always, my good friend Stu is with me. Say hey, Stu.
Hey, Stu.
And we have back with us Doug, which I'll say to him in just a second. But we are going to start, as we always do, with Time to Stump Stu. All right, Stu, Jack has a question about Job, because we had an episode talking about how it seems like God was just kind of had a friendly wager with Satan and messed with Job in the meantime. The story of Job is this is what Jack says. The story of Job is one sick example of a capricious God messing with his people. So more of a statement than a question, but how would you respond to that?
Right. Once again, it's when people try to play at being the Almighty themselves, they always put themselves in the role of God and decide, oh, if I was God, I would do this way. So God must be capricious because I feel like he's that way. But we don't know what it's like to be God. So that's kind of a big problem for us as humans when we try to put ourselves in God's place and assume his role. It's quite a step up for us since none of us are the guardians of the universe.
Mm-hmm. Does God ever mess with people, though?
Oh, I think he does at times, just for fun every once in a while. There'll be days, I think, where, my toast drops and everything goes haywire. And it's to me, one of the beauties is it points me back to him. When I start to think of all the things that could go wrong and the things that do go wrong, I'm always drawn back to the fact that God doesn't act capriciously and he has my best interests at heart. Bad things can happen to me, but they ultimately will be for my betterment.
Mm-hmm. Good. All right. Steve has said this, atheists can experience peace, wonder, passion, and love. If there really is a God, I am confident of her love and mercy. He said her, not me. That she will respect my choice to honor my own beliefs and that there won't be any eternal torment.
And that's because your God is you, from judging from what you just said, that you get to pick whatever you want God to be. So you've made up your own God. And kind of the problem, as always for this, is when humans attempt to play themselves as God. Could you repeat the first part of that real quick?
Atheists can experience peace, wonder, passion, and love.
All right. But they can't experience meaning. And that's what Bertrand Russell, who's one of the world's leading atheists, said. I come to the end of the day. He's a brilliant mathematician, great philosopher. He lived to be 98. So he had a long life. But he said, when I come to the end of this, there's no meaning for me. And as Viktor Frankl, who was a survivor of the Nazi concentration camps, said, the title of his work was Man's Search for Meaning. It's more important to us than even love. We have to find meaning and purpose in what we do and the universe around us. And as an atheist, there is no meaning or purpose. You can try to gin it up through some weird things, but it's not there.
Good. Well said. All right, so that was today's edition of Time to Stump Stu. Well, we have back with us Doug Anson. I enjoyed our last time on our first episode of Faith Doesn't Have to Be Blind. And so we're talking about apologetics and knowing why we believe what we believe. But welcome back, Doug. Good
Thank you. Thanks for having me the first time, and you're willing to take me back the second time.
Yes,
huh?
yes. It was by a vote of 60-40 that we had. No, it was overwhelming. We wanted you back.
I screwed it up the first time. We're going to try again, right?
No, you did great. So the first episode, we heard a lot of your story and why you became passionate. And that was your son who, growing up in the church, raising him in the church, decided come college age, I don't believe in this anymore. And so I don't believe in a God, and says he's an atheist. So we want to encourage you, if you haven't listened to episode 1, do that, because we're not going to go over all of that again. But we kind of left you on a cliffhanger that after you had this Zoom time or FaceTime with them, and it was something you had to do for your apologetics class, it really opened your eyes to how we can best talk to people who are questioning the faith, or who don't even have any, like your daughter-in-law, don't even have any kind of background or understanding of Christianity. And so how did this experience open your eyes, and what's kind of the rest of that story?
Yeah, that's a great question. I walked away from that experience, that discussion about worldviews, thinking, okay, this was a positive discussion. They were totally into it. They were fascinated by worldviews in general, but in particular, the big life questions that I asked them. They just found those to be important questions. And in the course of that discussion, as I told them, and I didn't do it, I didn't challenge them on anything that they said, I just let them talk. But never was the word God or Bible or Jesus or gospel ever spoken.
By you?
By me or them.
Okay.
Yeah, obviously by them. And that's huge, because when I thought about both of them, they represent, in my mind, a class, if you will, of non-believers, okay, which I would describe as well-educated by secular standards, okay, they're both college graduates, who have heard the gospel, or think they have, and understand the gospel, and have consciously said, no, I don't believe it. Now, my experience in most of the churches that I belong to, when they talk to you about witnessing and sharing your faith, it's all about get to the gospel quickly, right? Because ultimately that's the message that people need to hear and embrace. But people like my son, if you approach them too quickly with the gospel, they've already heard that and rejected it. And I could see him, the wall goes up. It's like, I don't want to hear that, okay? Mm-hmm. So my question going into that discussion with them was, can I find a way that I can talk to them, that they're willing to listen, that might eventually bring them back to talk about the gospel? And what I learned from this experience was a worldview discussion may very well be the right discussion to have with non-believers like themselves. And so that has been my approach. My focus has been on people to the left, if you will, of theism. Okay, they're not theists. Okay, they're atheists or agnostics or pantheists. Okay, something like that, in which they're far away from the notion of the gospel, because they're people who believe they're not sinful. They don't need to be saved, okay? Mm-hmm. The idea of someone dying on the cross and saving them makes no sense to them whatsoever. So the approach that I learned and I've applied in many instances is to have this worldview discussion. And I think you mentioned it before, tends to put a pebble in their shoe, because in most cases they don't know what a worldview is. They don't know what the questions are, the big life questions that a worldview must answer, and they haven't thought about them. Yeah. And so when they go through this, they kind of go through a self-discovery process. I watched on the screen during FaceTime, I watched my son and future daughter-in-law struggle to answer these questions, really trying hard and wanting to be consistent in how they answered them. But I believe, and I don't know this for sure, that they walked away from that discussion a whole lot less confident of their worldview than when it started. Yeah. And that's the first step.
And I think that translate into so many conversations that we can have. And it's the same with politics, because people will take something they heard on the news or soundbite. We were talking earlier before we were recorded, like, on the vaccine and things like that. It's like we hear this information, and if we don't really take the time to really dig into it, then it's easy to say something that I heard. But when somebody asks you a question, they're genuine and they're caring. And that's what you it doesn't sound like you don't put the big light on and say, we have some questions you have to answer here. It's like, no, I genuinely want to know your worldview. And everybody wants to talk about themselves and what they believe, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, right. All right, I'll tell you what I believe. But then if you ask a few well-choiced follow-up questions, then they start to realize, wait, maybe I don't know about as much about this issue or this politician, or most importantly, my faith, or where I'm going to go when I'm done. And those asking questions is so much more productive than just quickly giving them answers.
Right.
And that's been a big journey for me too, because I just want to hurry up and say, well, here's a good answer to that, because I did some digging. But it's like, no, just keep your mouth shut and let them work through it, because God is patient. He's patient with me. He's patient with them. But I want them to sign on the dotted line. Yeah. All right, I'm going to follow Jesus today.
Yeah, God listens to us, so we need to listen to them. My son is more willing to listen to what I have to say now, because he knows that I have listened and will listen to what he has to say. If we're just in the transmit mode all the time, they turn us off, particularly parents. Yeah. So, that was a great learning experience for me, and I've applied that same kind of discussion in many settings, and I can tell you, it's always been a positive experience. It has never turned hostile, because a worldview discussion is essentially neutral. So you might start out arguing with somebody about homosexuality or abortion, and I would say, you know what? It's amazing how differently we look at these issues. Why is that? I bet that we have different worldviews. And then I shift the conversation over to worldviews, and suddenly the hostility goes away. And then you actually, most times, are in an advantageous position, because they don't know what worldview is and they haven't thought about these questions. But they want to have that discussion, and it's positive. It's always been positive.
Now, one thing I know, there's not a one size fits all, and everybody's different. And I think that just comes with time and maturity to understand, because some people might be ready at that moment to hear the gospel, and obviously we don't want to hold back to offend them. But I think it depends on their personality type, how much digging they've done. So I just want us to be careful to say, well, you have to take it slow with everybody you come into contact with for fear of rejection. But that's not really what's driving this. It's just having that discernment to know, where is somebody